All right, we're back. We are COMP308. It's Emerging Technologies in the winter 2019 semester as Centennial, and we're week 4, part 1 of our broadcast. We're going to talk about an intro to MongoDB. So I've put up online, let's take a look at our schedule. I wanted to kind of go there with you first, just to talk about where we're at. I like to kind of review this periodically. So we're week 4, and if you look at it, it says Intro to MongoDB. Using Mongoose with MongoDB is something we're supposed to handle. And it says down in here, perform CRUD operations. That's a tall order, right? First, we're going to install Mongo, figure out what Mongo is, talk about NoSQL, and then do CRUD too. Yeah, that's not going to happen, guys. In my first class, I kind of ran out of time. So what's probably going to happen is because they have, we're doing authentication next week with Mongo and Mongoose, I'm probably going to do the second part of CRUD next week in week 5. Plus authentication, which would be, again, very hard to do, but not as hard as doing everything this week. This is just too much. So this week we'll do the first part of CRUD. We'll do a display or a read, if you will, the read part of CRUD. We'll do that part, and then we'll leave the create, update, and delete for next week. Yeah, because at least you already know how to do CRUD. And then so you need to do CRUD for authentication too. Like if I want to make a user, I need to create, right? If I want to read the user, I need to update the user, right? Delete the user. So I got to do CRUD again next week. So it doesn't make any sense for me to do it twice. And then it probably fits better with what we're going to be doing next week. So usually it's kind of a 2-week thing to do MongoDB and with CRUD and authentication. But we'll see what we can do to get it all done by next week. All right, so next week, again, it's kind of a combination of authentication plus the remainder of the create, update, and delete portion of the CRUD that we won't handle this week. We won't have the time, as you'll see. So we're going to be doing that. Again, I'm going to take a look at hopefully I'll have a chance to look at any kind of logos and that kind of stuff that you have for your portfolio site. Your personal portfolio site, which is going to be due later on this semester, like in the first part. So we'll talk about that as well. And then I'm going to be handling 2 different PowerPoint slides. So if you look at your week 4 content, I have week 4A, which is an intro to Mongo, and week 4B, which is an intro to Mongoose, which is a Node.js plugin, a package. We're going to npm package we're going to use to connect to MongoDB. So we're going to do these 2 today, and then we'll hit CRUD next week, most of the CRUD. Okay, there's also a little lab that I put up, which you're going to see. There's quite a few instructions. This is due next week this time around, not Monday, only because there's quite a few little things you need to do, and you need to explore this. So we're going to put on the brakes a little bit on some of the stuff. Normally it's pretty quick. You have an exercise due in class. This is not a single class exercise. I think it needs a little bit more time for most of you. So I'm going to make it due next Saturday. So that way you can hand it in anytime between now and next week. Some of you won't do it. And I know some people aren't doing them, but I recommend them because the test, I'll ask you to do some of the same things that I'm getting you to do on the exercises on the test, right? So I recommend doing them. All right, so away we go. So a couple things to note. One of the things we're going to do today is install MongoDB. So I'm going to start with that, and we'll talk about what it is after. So MongoDB. So first thing to do is if you go to the Mongo website, it looks like this. And I've put the links for MongoDB and something else called MLab up online. One of the students from first section also posted a little link on our Slack channel for how to install Mongo for Macs, right? Because the Mac installation is different. And it would be because of the way MongoDB is structured. Okay, so what is MongoDB? MongoDB is a document-based database as opposed to a relational database. So a little bit different. It uses kind of a JavaScript structure on the back end for how to store everything. And we're going to see that. But right now, before we do it, we need to try it out. So if you go to resources, as an example, and documentation, there's the documentation for MongoDB. right? That's the first part. Where it says try free on the MongoDB website is where you want to click on to download it. And there's a few little links here. So there's cloud, server, and tools, right? You don't want to be doing cloud here in this course. If you click on server, at least not yet, server is what we want. So this server link, unfortunately, there's no link for it. It's the exact same link up here. It's just the server tab, right? So I've given you that link on Slack. And there's a couple of versions. So this is a version 4.05 of the software. And on the Windows side, Windows 64, 64-bit is what we want. On the Mac side, it does support, why is it flicking this way? Mac OS 64, any 64-bit version of Mac. So this is it. The package, you can choose from MSI package, and it's the executable or installation package, or a zip file. I recommend the MSI is fine. So if we download this, it's about 198 megs, almost 200 megs. So I will talk while you're downloading, right? So please download this, click the download button. I've already done this morning, but if you click there, you'll be able to get it within short order. So let's talk about, it's not the right one. Let's talk about Mongo a little bit. And what is Mongo? You know, you may have heard about MongoDB, but you don't really know what it is. So we'll kind of be defining that today. So that's kind of what we're covering. So really what most times when we make a web application, we're using a relational database, something like Microsoft SQL, right? And you guys have had experience with that before in other classes, yeah? Microsoft SQL. So the way in recent years we've been using those databases is having some kind of, you know, object relational mapper that we're using, which is software that wraps around the database, right? Which is fine, right? So that's the entity framework. Entity framework is what we use with .NET as an example, and it creates entities for the database that creates this kind of a wrapper around it. So it makes it easier for us to create a model, and then you know, which is a class that basically refers to the schema that the database is using. For example, if you have a database, we're going to create one today, a person database. You're going to have a schema for each of the tables in the database. For example, what kind of fields the database is going to have. Is it going to have, or that table, is it going to have a first name, last name, an age field, a contact number? Like, this is kind of the schema for that particular table. And what the ORM does allows us to create a model that connects to that. So it's been really popular because it helps us manage databases a little bit better. One thing about databases is they're quite complex, and for web applications, it becomes challenging to scale, right? So the bigger the data that comes in, scaling a database is always very, very challenging. The other thing to notice is that traditional databases that are relational are also another language. We need to understand another language to use them, right? SQL, which is, so now here's a traditional setup. You know HTML, you know CSS, you know JavaScript, you know PHP for the backend, you know SQL for the database. That's like 5 different things to know. And this is why the Mean stack and you know, being a full stack developer using Mean is so popular, because mostly what you use is JavaScript and JSON, which is like another form of JavaScript, right? It's you know, JavaScript object notation, right? So that's like JavaScript everywhere. It's like one language. If you know one language really, really well, then you can really produce a really cool web application. One of the things that that is different amongst document-based database, like what we're going to be using today, is that they use key value pairs for storage. We're going to see there. So we have a key, which is the property name, and the value, which is associated with that property. One thing to note is that the stuff we're going to be talking about today is not the magic bullet, all right? Just because we're going to use MongoDB, it may not be the optimal solution for every situation. There is nothing like that. If someone tells you, so what's the best stuff to do? And the people ask me that question. So Tom, what's the best like backend we can use? And I'm kind of loath to answer that question. It's like, okay, well, what are you doing? What's solution? What do you use the solution for? What? What's your problem? What problem are you trying to solve, right? And I know it's a kind of an ugly way to talk, but you got to ask that question, like, what problem are you solving? Well, I want to make an e-commerce website. I'm not sure Mongo will be the best solution for that. I'm not sure, depending on what you want to try and do, right? Because maybe you need a lot of relations, right? If you have a database requirement where there's a lot of relational stuff, and you got to rewrite all that stuff by hand and create functions and everything else that Microsoft SQL's server does very, very well. Why would you do that? It's already there for you. Use what exists, right? But if you have a very simple, flat hierarchy when it comes to your data, or maybe your data doesn't have to be in tables. There doesn't have to be a relationship between one table and another, or they're unrelated tables, a lot of them. Then, and if you want quick access, because a lot of times this stuff, when it comes to searching and sorting, is really fast, right? Then, then maybe a document-oriented database is for you, right? So that's the thing. If you're doing mean stack, then there's another thing. I mean, you're going to do the mean stack for a couple of reasons. One, because you want to be responsive and modern and quick and all those kind of things. And other times we use the mean stack when we do mobile development, right? So for example, we use maybe Angular, kind of an Angularized front end or whatever, with Express and Node on the back end, kind of thing with mobile devices. And from that perspective, there's some other solutions as well. Firebase comes to mind. Firebase works really, really well with Angular, and Firebase works well with iOS and Android devices. So having that one whole ecosystem that works with everything, like one data store that works for iOS, Android, and the web, that's a good solution. So we'll be talking about Firebase a little bit later on the course. But anyways, at the end of the day, the things to note are this. The differences between a document-oriented database and a relational database are there are no tables in a document-oriented database. There's just collections. Right. So whenever we say collections in your mind, you should translate that to tables. Collections, tables. And there's no records in a document-oriented database. There's documents, right? So records equals documents, kind of, right? So that's one thing to note. The backend, the way it's been organized in terms of data format is JSON. Well, actually, for MongoDB, it's called BSON. So variant of JSON. I guess it's brothers, sisters, cousins, uncle, I don't know, some kind of relationship they have there. But, it's very similar. When you know JSON, then BSON is like, you can hardly notice a difference. Here's an old structure that we may have seen in the past where we have someone's trying to make a blog. No one makes blogs anymore, right? Because there's too many of them, right? And you can not make your own blog. Chances are you're probably going to use a blog or blog application that's already in existence. However, if you wanted to make a blog that was integrated with your web application, and I'm just trying to contrive that because it's become less popular, or a forum, I think that's probably better, a discussion board, something like that, then maybe this works. And sometimes what they have is a whole pile of relationships between posts and comments. Posts would be the actual table, and then you'd have, for each post, you would have multiple comments. Right, so there's a relationship, one-to-many relationship, but you don't have to do that with a document-oriented database, especially MongoDB. You could embed your comments within the post, right? So you wouldn't have to have a separate comments table. You would have only comments relating to that post, right? So you don't need the extra structure. So totally different way of doing things, and valid. It's pretty good from that perspective. Here's an example of a document. You have the document, it looks like JSON. It has a key, which is title, and the value, which is first blog post, right? Here's another key that's comments. And then you have these square brackets that indicate some kind of array of objects, because you can see the curly braces indicate object. And then, so an array of objects with the structure of title and first comment. So here's your comments, an array of comments, and then this would be your entire document, right? So it's kind of all in one, right? You have a single document that has, kind of both the comments and the actual blog post itself. So, so really, at the end of the day, we want to be able to move away from this idea of a heavy structure that uses tables and records and relations and functions, and to do more of a flat structure with with this document-oriented database. One of the ways we see that there's a big problem sometimes is when you make model changes. So a good example of that is you have a model schema, call it what you like, and let's suppose in using the entity framework and .NET, for those people who remember that course, you guys did that course, right? And you have, someone says, well, we have a contact database, and we have name, first name, last name, and age, and a telephone number, and we have an email address, but we also want to add some additional information to the table. How hard is that to do? Oh man, sometimes it can be like rejigging the whole database, right? You got to do this. Now, luckily, .NET Core allows you to go back and update the database, and it does a lot of the coding for you. But can you imagine the old days when you had to do all that yourself? And it would be basically a recursive change throughout the entire model structure. You don't have to do that here with this. I mean, this is the beautiful thing. One thing that MongoDB allows you to do is every record document can be completely different. So that's a positive and negative. So positive is like, okay, so I don't have to use the same schema for every document in the same collection, right? I can use one schema. For example, maybe I want name, telephone number, and email address for the first document. But the second document isn't a name at all. It's something else. So some developers really don't like that. It reminds them of, how JavaScript is so fluid and there's no data types and all that kind of stuff that we talked about before. It drives them crazy. But I mean, again, Mongo allows that. Sometimes you don't need a complicated structure. You can do things in one collection and you're good, right? So, and it doesn't work like that. If you have that kind of simple structure, you need flexibility. SQL doesn't help you, all right? So again, this is the kind of stuff that you want to get out of. By their nature, document-based databases are schemaless. That's one thing to know. We are going to create a schema, though, in this class because it makes it more structured. It just does, right? But however, going beyond what we're going to be doing and creating relationships and everything on your own, once you start going there, again, going back to what we said earlier, you may want to consider that that's not the right solution. If you're going to make a lot of code so that your database acts like another type of database, like, for example, if you want it to be, I want my Mongo database to act like, like kind of like a SQL server. Why? That's crazy, right? I wouldn't want to do it that way. I want to use SQL Server, and there's connections in Node that allow you to use MySQL and SQL Server. No problem, right? So please don't do it just for the sake of doing it, just because you want to have a full stack with Mongo on the back end. So again, so one thing that we want to do is the application itself is going to have the brains, not the database on the Mongo side. Okay, the application is the thing that's going to connect with Mongo and do the data trading. The database itself is literally just going to serve up JSON or close enough to JSON. So that's why it's called NoSQL. There is no structured query language for trying to search and sort and all that kind of stuff. It literally is some very simple and what seems to be regular expression-based searches that we're going to be doing. Okay, so it's kind of easy to use. We're going to see that, and there's not that many commands. Let's talk about MongoDB. Again, this has been around since 2007. Around that time, 2007, 2008, V8 for 2008 with our Chrome V8 engine, 2009 with Node, and then an Express, and 2007 for Mongo, where they wanted to kind of create this idea of a hosting service that allows developers to focus on building their application. And Mongo was born from that. It came from the word humongous, right? To create Mongo, a Mongo database. There are other NoSQL databases out there, like CouchDB as one of them, and there's others as well. But Mongo seems to be the most popular one. Again, we have the idea of JSON outputs. So it looks very much like JSON. Couple of clients, big clients that use Mongo or used to use Mongo are eBay and the New York Times. So they're kind of a couple of good test examples. So it's not like it's not a popular thing to use. It's being used. Some features of Mongo are things like JSON-like storage we talked about before, named Bison. And one of the things is again, ease of use. Okay, let's try and see if we can talk about this. One of the things that Mongo also has is this idea of a primary key. So before we used to have in a table, we had a key that was automatically incremented, an auto-incrementing key. primary key. For example, it starts off at 1, keeps going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every time you add a new thing. This is where Mongo moved away from that. There isn't a numeric primary key for each of the documents in a collection. The primary key is actually generated. So the way it works is 4 bytes represent kind of the second since the Unix epoch, right? Which is some kind of time when, I guess in the beginning of time for Unix, right? Probably 1976, if I'm not wrong. And then we have a 3-byte machine identifier, which is kind of like, okay, what machine am I using this on? And a 2-byte process ID for that particular process that you're setting up, and a 3-byte counter starting with a random value. So it's a hash that gets generated based on a formula, a heuristic, if you will. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. And it kind of looks like this. So here's an ID, there's your key, and your value, you start off with object ID, you surround the actual ID with object ID, and then the ID itself, which is just a hash that's been generated. Okay, so this is what a document is kind of going to look like. Let's see if we can, if we've downloaded Mongo now. I don't know if you guys have downloaded Mongo. Have you done it? Okay. So I did as well, and I'm going to see if I can kick that off. I'm going to tell you what to do and what not to do when we install Mongo. Here it is. I've already done the installation for MongoDB. I'm going to go through most of the process and then stop because I've already done the installation. Okay. So I'm going to click next. So a couple things to note is you're going to have an install or kind of an update, full thing. I have a change, repair, or remove, right? Because I've already installed it. If I click change, you're going to see that a similar thing to kind of a custom as opposed to full install. There's 2 options, custom or full install. And if you click on this little button here, you're going to see that these are the things you want to install. You want to install all this stuff. So this is good. Next. Here is what you don't want to do. Do not run Mongo as a service. Okay, we're not going to do that in this class. This would install Mongo as a service for your Windows 10 or Windows 7 or 8 or whatever version of Windows you're running. Hopefully not anything else other than Windows 10, but some people do what they want to do. I'm going to click next. Don't check this one. It says install MongoDB Compass. This is extra software that we do not require for this course. So please don't install this piece right here. Uncheck this one. Okay. And then the next part is we're ready to change MongoDB. You might have another option that gives you another kind of installation or something else. All right. Don't install any extra software with MongoDB. If it says just next to install and click install, I think this is where you want to go to. You want to go to that particular place. So go ahead and finish your installation. For me, one of the other things while I wait for this installation to finish for you that I got to point out is on your system itself, you need there's a couple of requirements you need. You need to set up a folder in your C drive called data. So please do that now. This can happen after the installation because the installation is not going to worry about this. It's going to actually use the data folder after the installation starts. All right. So see where it says under C drive, you want to make a new folder called data. All right. Inside the data folder, you want to make another folder called DB, lowercase d and b. Right. So you need this. So data on the C drive and inside the data folder, a DB folder. Make sure nothing's in the DB folder. For me, there is stuff in the DB folder because guess what? I've created a database today, and it looks like this. Okay. So an empty data and DB. Now, for people who are on Mac, if you follow the instructions I put up on the Slack page that one of our students found, you're going to be golden because it uses Homebrew to install stuff, and it's not so bad. If you're using the machine in front of you from the school, Ryan, then there's some steps we need to take. So please follow carefully because all of you right now, because we're not using MongoDB as a service, you need to do these changes to your laptop or and the machine in front of you. Okay. So now that we've installed Mongo, let's say we've installed it correctly, we're going to close this off. I'm going to go to my Windows here and I'm going to type in advanced system settings where it says view advanced system settings here. Press enter, and it's going to take you to this dialog box. And we've seen this dialog box before when we were installing Node, but let's talk about it again. So this dialog box, there's a button here called Environment Variables. Let's click on that. Under Environment Variables, if you have the Windows 10 version, it's going to look like this. This part up here, just to reiterate, is for you as a user, the current user that's in kind of logged into your system. And this one is for everybody else, and including you. So this is kind of a global, like a system variable, and this is an environment variable for you as a user. So we want to start here. So if you go to the path variable, and if you double click, you can see that mine might look very different from yours, but one of the things you need to do is install a new part of the path. If you click the new button, right, it'll allow you to have another entry. And what you want to type in there is C:\program files, MongoDB, and so on. How do you find this path if you don't want to type it? You can find it if you go to program files. Let me show you where this is. So let's go to C:\program files. Go there with me. And under program files, there's MongoDB. Under MongoDB, there's server, and you have version 4. That's the one you want. I have a couple of previous versions also, but if you go to previous to 4 and then into bin, the bin folder, this, my friends, is the path. So program files, MongoDB, server 4, bin. And if you want to get that, you can click edit, right-click and edit address, which will turn this into something that's copyable. You can copy this one, and then you can go back to your advanced system settings and paste it in there. All right, so double click here somewhere and then paste it. Okay, and then you should have this in as an entry. If you do not have this, MongoDB will never run. Those two things, actually. If you don't have your empty data folder with a DB folder inside of that and this link, this path, your MongoDB, will never run. So let's make sure that we have that. All right, so that's this part. I'm going to press OK. You can also, I recommend also to put it in your path in the bottom portion, in your system variable. So if you go double click on the path here, and again, what you can do is you can just copy paste in the bottom there. So double click, install a new, or insert a new entry, and then put in the, double click and enter the path. That will make sure that when we use the command line, MongoDB will be able to run. Okay. When we run the command line, I'm just going to close all this up now. So I'm assuming that you've already done this by following along. Yes. Hopefully, yes. Some people are late, but I'm sorry. Now we want to do the command line test. So we're going to go into command lines. So press CMD. You should have your command line that looks like this. I'm just going to go into this and drop out of these ones so I can show you what it looks like. For the first time, if you want to use your command line, you're going to have to do this. Type in Mongod, M-O-N-G-O-D. If you can't do this, and by the way, if you're a Mac person, it'll be sudo mongod, right? If you can't do this, or if it gives you an error, then something you've done wrong with your installation, but you must be able to see your port on port 27017. That should be the port you're running, okay? If somehow it gives you a weird port, or if it says that I can't run MongoDB, I don't know what you're talking about, then there's an installation problem. Are you with me? Does anyone have an installation problem?
What we should type?
Mongod, M-O-N-G-O-D. Actually, what you're supposed to say is MongoD, where it's Mongo on the server. So this little window here that we've got, notice I didn't bring it up in Visual Studio Code because this is the server window. We're going to keep this window open, my friends. Okay, we're not going to stop this window. This window represents the Mongo server. Think about this as a little your database server. Okay. To access the database server, the Mongo server, we're going to bring up another window, another command prompt like this. So we have two. We have one, which is the database server, and the other one, which is we're going to use this as our client in a second, just to show you what this does. So to connect with our Mongo server, we just type the word in Mongo, not Mongod, Mongo, like this, and press enter. If everything goes well, and sometimes it doesn't, like this. See how it didn't go well for me? It gives me this delay, like this. See that? This is not connection. It says connecting to. You should have a little arrow. If you have a little arrow, you're golden. If you have this, something went wrong, and it's okay, right? So the way I remedy this is I kind of notice my server. I just kind of get out of my server again, I just press Control C, and I'm in now. Here it is. Sometimes I got to do it twice. I got Control C twice, and then I escape from this, and I want to escape from this, and then when I just kind of reactivate Mongo here, and then immediately go in and just do a Mongo here, and then I'm in, right? And sometimes it takes that synchronization or connection for the first time. All right, so now that I'm in, I want to, this is my client, this is my server. We can minimize the server. We're not going to use this right now. I'm just going to minimize this, but the client can stay up on in front of us. And what we can do here is if we type in the command CLS, that's clear screen, right? There we go. All right, so first things first, let's do the first command you should learn for MongoDB, which is show DBS. Let's try this, show DBS, and press enter. And you can see here I have admin, config, demo, and local. Now I created the demo database earlier for section 1. For you guys, we're going to do something different because you guys are section 2. So we're going to, in order for us to make a new database, we have to do that first. We're going to use the keyword use space and then the name of the database. We're just going to call this test. Yay! And then press enter. And if you notice, it's going to say switch to DB test. So we did demo in the morning, and now we're doing test, different database. All right. Now remember, in our database, we don't have tables. We have collections, right? And if I show collections right now, it's going to return nothing. There's no collections. We don't have any collections in our database. However, if I want a collection, I can just insert into it, right? Here's how it goes. DB dot the collection name that you want. Let's call this collection our first collection, right? So first dot. And then what you want to do, I want to insert. The insert command, what it does is it kind of creates a new entry, a new document. I'm going to open bracket, curly brace, right? Because inside the bracket, I'm actually going to put in an object. Here's what object looks like. Key value pairs. The name, colon. So that's, the name is in quotation marks, colon. And then let's add another name. So we'll call myself Tom. There we go, right? So that's your name. You put your name in there. And then close the curly braces, close the round brackets, and then press enter. And you should have this, and inserted 1. Do you have this? This is correct. This is a good thing. Okay, cool. So I have my first record in my first collection. The collection's called first, right? Because that's what I named it. And if I want to show collections now, by the way, you can use your arrow keys for this to remember commands. I can arrow up to where it says show collections, and then I can press enter, and it'll say first. I have the first collection, right? And if I want to see the data, I can say db.first.find, right? And then press enter, and that'll show me everything that's inside the first collection. Notice the syntax. I've got ID with this object ID. My object ID is always for sure going to be different than yours, right? This massive object ID, right? Then I have my name, which is the key, and Tom, which is the value, right? If I want to display this in a different way to make it nice, right? You can use a modifier. You can say db.first.find.pretty. And then, oh, I'll be okay. db.first.find, right? db.first, is that just right? Find, oh, it's because I only have one piece of data. .pretty, and it should do it. Oh, it doesn't do it, but it should. One of the ways you can add additional things, I can insert. Let's do an insertion. Another one. Let's make. I want to give myself more than that. What if I wanted to drop my whole collection? I don't want it anymore. I can use the drop command. So I can say do something like db.first.drop, and that would eliminate that database. Watch that. Sorry, collection. And it says true as an answer. Guess what? Now, if I go db.first.find, then we have nothing. And by the way, did you see? It didn't say, "Are you sure?" Didn't ask you that question. So if you have this massive database, and inside the database you have multiple collections, and if you go db dot whatever the collection name is dot drop, It's not going to say, are you sure? It's just going to drop it. So be careful, be careful, be careful when you start entering data. So you can see the commands are quite simple so far, right? Now I want to add in db.first.insert. Let's do a more complex one. So again, insert, open bracket, open curly brace. I want to add in my name and like kind of a first name, last name, and age. Let's try that. So first name. Okay, my first name is Tom. There we go. Comma separated values, right? So last name, I'm using camel case for this. You don't have to. Right? And then comma, and then the age. And then this time, because it's a number, I don't have to put quotations. I just got to put an age, like for example, 35. And then close curly brace, close round bracket, and press enter. And now I have a much more complex entry. db.first.insert and those. So I've got a collection called first with one document that has 3 properties: a first name, a last name, and an age, right? That's what I have. If I want to add other ones, I can just arrow up and modify them. So arrow up, and then let's say instead of my first name being Tom, let's do a John Doe. So John, and let's change my last name to Doe by just spacing over here. I think John Doe is going to be, John Doe is going to be like 30 years old. So let's modify this, age 30 to 35 to 30. And let's do another one for Jane Doe, just because. Jane, last name Doe. Let's say she's a little bit younger. We'll make her 25. And you know what? Let's complete it with maybe a smaller child. Okay, not a child, a teenager, Sarah Doe, and her name and her age. She's maybe we'll make her 15. There we go. Okay, so I want to display all this stuff, so I can just go show again a db.find. First of all, db.first, the name of the collection, .find. If I did this, I get this. Let's see if this works now. db.first.find.pretty. This is how it's supposed to work. Yes. So you see what pretty does is it takes the actual documents and spreads them out so you can see them a little better. db.first.find.pretty. I'll open up the window so you can see a little bit more. Does that make sense? So insertion is pretty simple. Insertion into a database is like a create, okay? A find is a very simple read, but we can also use find to find different pieces of data. For example, I want to find all people in my database that are over the age of 20, right? So the way you would do that is something like this, db.first.find. Now, in the first, when you're searching, what you can do is you can also, in your find, put in a object that you're searching for. For example, I want to find all people with an age of greater than, like I said, greater than 15 or 20, right? So we can say that I have to specify the age, right, as the thing we're looking for. And instead of putting a value, we're going to say $ greater than, right? $ greater than, and then if I'm not wrong, it's value. Let me just make sure before I do the search with you, and I give you the wrong information. I kind of remember all this stuff. So we did the find. Yeah, it's right here. I was wrong. So it goes like this. So another open curly brace, and then $ greater than. So GT is greater than, and then a colon, and then let's say greater than 20. And close that curly brace, close the first curly brace, close the bracket, and press enter. And you're going to get this. So this is the search. You can see it right here. And this is on page 28 on the PowerPoint, db.post.find. Here's the example. Whatever the thing you're looking to find is, and then another curly brace, $GT for greater than, and then the value 10. So it's not that difficult to use this syntax, and we're going to use this when it comes to deletion as well as updating, right? Part of our delete or remove is actually called remove, and update is first searching for what you want to remove or update. So it's like they incorporate the find with the remove, okay, which makes sense. Okay, so that's how it works. It works like this, right? And there's other ones. There's less than. There's also some other commands you can use. And you can also combine commands greater than this and less than this, as an example, to create a range for yourself. But basically, that is the way we would find stuff. So if I wanted to do the same thing, let's clear that out. And if I said, I want to find this, but I also want to make it pretty, I can just do one of these. So then, oh, doesn't like that. It says type error, pretty. Oh yeah, I said pret, haha, pretty. There you go. And so it actually returns something a little bit nicer. So why is pretty good? Because then I can do something like this. If I want to copy this whole thing, I can use it as like a copy paste operation, right? It's kind of cool. I can also copy it the other way around. Sometimes we have multiple properties or documents within documents, and seeing it in this format is a little easier to swallow than seeing one big line of JSON, which is compressed. So that's why it's a cool thing to know how to do this pretty. Notice again that the object ID is totally different for each one. It's unique. And so there is no rhyme or reason the way it looks like. It creates a hash. Some of it's the same. There are some random values here as well. And each of these is unique for every system. Okay? Questions so far? Again, we're using the MongoDB client to do some command lines stuff, right? And one of the questions I got earlier was, isn't there like a user interface for this? Yeah. But the idea is that you should know how to do this. You should understand the stuff that's going on in the back end. We're going to make our own user interface for this kind of stuff. That's part of the reason why we're doing this today. But you should understand the basic commands, like how it works in the background, so you understand what's happening. And that's why we're doing this. I want to update. Let's update, Tom. So here's how you do an update. I want to say db.first. So again, the collection. And then I want to say update. What am I updating? I got to find the thing that I'm updating. So I got to put in a search. I want to search for a name. Actually, there's no name. First name of Tom. So here's the thing I'm searching for. First name Tom. And what I want to do, that's my first, the first argument. And then comma. And then the second argument. What am I modifying? Well, let's say I want to modify his last name. So we'll say I want to modify Tom's last name. These crazy fingers of mine. Last name to something else other than my long last name. And let's call myself Alphabet. Because when I was young, my kids would make fun of me. They would say Tommy Alphabet. You have a long last name, buddy. And if I did this, and if I close it off like this, and if I modified it, what do you think is going to happen here when I enter this? Okay, so I do this. I say, so one matched. I found a match for Tom. I updated, upserted 0, and I modified 1. Okay, now let's see what I actually got. So if I go back to displaying everything, so let's say I want to find pretty, I got this. What the heck happened to me here? What did it do? It killed the rest of my data and only updated that record with last name Alphabet. Why? Because that's how it works. If you update things, just update, and you don't use, there's another way of using the keyword set for only setting the things you want to modify. It'll modify the entire document, right? It's almost like you're rewriting the entire document again with using the same object ID. So the object ID didn't change. That's the only thing that didn't change. But everything else, other than the thing I wanted to modify, which is last name, changed. Guys, that's not a good outcome at all, right? So one of the things, if you follow through, and by the way, this in MongoDB talks about how it has indexing, it has redundancy with the replica set. These are all things that are out of scope of what we're trying to do here. It has a failover, backend. You can spread it among different machines for performance reasons. These are all nice things to know, but we really don't care about that in this course. We just need to know that it has that capability, it has the ability for you to do backups and redundancy and so on. And something called sharding. But what we really want to know is this Mongo shell stuff. And if I go back to this, where we did a find, it's actually inside of your CRUD operations. You can do an insert and an update. Here's an insert that we saw. And when we go to update, there is an area in here where we can set a value. So here's what it looks like instead. This is the better way. Now I've just skipped a whole bunch of stuff, but remember this. Think about this little document, this little PowerPoint as a reference. So here's what I can do. Instead of modifying the entire document, I can only set the values that I want for that particular thing and not touch the other ones. Okay. So if I go back, let's fix the first one. So I want to update this one where it says first name Tom. There is no first name Tom anymore. It's only last name alphabet. The first name Tom is gone. Last name is alphabet. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to modify all the ones I want. You can see that here it gives you an opportunity to modify more than one, not just one. You can modify all of them if you want, or some of them. So if I only want to modify my last name and change it, I can do that by using the keyword $set. And then the thing that you want to modify, so the title, as an example in this case, we want to modify my last name, so just the last name. And we want to modify the last name and give it my real last name or your last name. And you can see that I've got to close off all these brackets. When I do that and I press enter, I've modified only one. Now this is not a great example, but if I go back up to find, you can see now that my last name has changed. And let's just add in the other ones. So if I go back up to, again, updates, and I want to set the first name as an example, I can do that. Set the first name to Tom. And I can also do multiple things. Instead of just setting the first name, I can also set the age at the same time to whatever I want. So those two things. And then I can close it off. And I didn't do that right. I didn't do that right. What I meant was I closed this one off, and then I got to close this one off. Sorry, let me see that. So 1, 2 open. Oh. Try that again. First name. Age 35. I close this one off, and then this one off. And syntax is wrong. Why? Can I do that? Oh, I have to use multiple sets. Let me say that. I'm just going to do this.
No, you don't have an extra.
No, I didn't. No. I need these two like this for sure. So what did I miss? Maybe there's something. There we go. That's the problem. So let's try this out. Because I know you can do this. You can go comma, and then age, and then 35.
I think you are asking to be like the T something.
No. Oh, yes. Yeah, I did change it. But I just wanted to see that this part is done properly. So set first name Tom, and then age is 35. That's in there. And that does this one, and this one. That should work. Yeah, that worked. It didn't work. So let's just go to clear the screen and try it again. So find db dot, trying too many things at once. First dot find, and let's just do that. So db, I'll modify that one part at a time. So I'll say we'll modify our first name to Tom. Then we'll modify our age, add an age to 35. Make sure that it's not a string, but actually a number. And now we should have everything that we want, right? But let's suppose I wanted to modify only one thing. Then I could always go back. Let's say if I didn't like my last name, I wanted to change that. I could change my last name. So I search by last name, and then I set the last name to something else, just the last name, not the whole thing. Let's say I want to make my last name, I don't know, Vanguard. Making this up. It's easier than Tsiliopoulos. Okay, there we go. And now you can see that only Vanguard has changed, but not my first name or my age, right? So again, that's how you would do updates with the set keyword. Yes?
I tried to set like to check multiple properties and it worked.
I just probably didn't put it in right. It should work. You should be able to do multiple properties, no problem. Okay, so that's this. And if I want to delete something, let's say I want to remove a property, I'm going to remove my name. So I can go do the same thing. I can go, I want first part is defined. So I can say db.first. And then I want to remove. What am I looking to remove? I want to remove an object that has a first name, right, of Tom. That's the one I remove. And then press enter, and I remove one, right? And if I do db.first.find.pretty, then I see that there's only 3. I can remove one by using the remove. The first argument in the remove is the something that matches the object I'm trying to remove, whether it's the first name, last name, whatever kind of property I want to define. I can also use the same matching criteria that I use with the find. I can say that an object that has greater than age of 20, age of greater than 20. I can do that. And if I want to, I can delete multiple objects by using true at the end. So if I say I want to find multiple objects that are greater than 25 years old, then I can delete all those objects. Very simple. So this part here, which is updating existing documents, that kind of tells you how to do the set command. And notice what it says this is around page 65 of the PowerPoints. It says that the first argument is the selection of criteria. The second argument is the update statement, and the last argument is the options object, which allows us a lot of times to do things like multiple updates, update multiple objects, and so on. So that's that one. And deleting documents kind of works the same way. There's 2 arguments. The first argument is the deletion criteria, and the second argument is a Boolean argument that indicates whether or not to remove multiple documents. So that it would look like this: db dot whatever the name of the collection is dot remove. If you did this, it removes the entire collection. Don't do this, right? That would be like everything, right? Because that's like almost like a star argument, if you will, or multiple. But this one here, it says, hey, a db.posts, in this case, the collection name, remove a user named Alice, right? So this just removes that one user. And then you can also use every user with a name Alice, because you're using the true indicator at the end. Guys, I'll tell you right now, for the most part, what I just showed you is 90% of what we do in MongoDB. That's why it's so easy, and it's so easy to pick up. It's not a lot of stuff to learn. Now, of course, there's more details, and there's other kinds of modifications to those commands. But where you can find all that is up on mongodb.com, or sorry, mongodb.com/resources. If you go to resources, and if you go to documentation, or docs.mongodb.com, this one, it gives you the documentation. On the right, there's something called the MongoDB manual, and it takes you here with whatever version you want to check. and it's searchable. So if I say something like, I want to find how to do insertion, I just put insert, and then it'll give you the manual for how to do an insertion. And it gives you some pretty good stuff. It gives you some code examples. It's basically an API documentation of how to do it. And this is for the command line only. Okay, so it tells you how to do stuff. So this is good. Any questions around Mongo? Like from a high level, I'll tell you right now that this is the first thing you need to know how to do. You need to be able to understand how to structure your database. We're going to be adding more to this test database, and we're going to actually display this database today on your website. Okay, but this is the number one thing to understand how Mongo is kind of structured. And this little PowerPoint tells you pretty much most of the stuff you need. Okay, and this covers Mongo's command line and a history of Mongo. Okay, I want to stop here. I want to take a short break. And when we come back, I want to get into more of the coding part. How do I use MongoDB? How do I, now that I've installed it, how do I connect MongoDB to my Node.js application? That, my friends, will take the remainder of semester to do properly. Not just today, semester. We're going to have all kinds of stuff to learn throughout the entire time. We're going to be doing things like authentication next week. And like I said, in full CRUD, a little bit today, a little bit next week. But there's a lot of stuff to understand how to do. And we're going to work together on doing that. As an alternate, I want to mention it today. We're not going to really go into it at all. And it's kind of out of scope for today's lesson. But one of the things that we're going to be also talking about this semester is something called Firebase. So Firebase is also a NoSQL server, right? It's hosted by Google. So it's using Google Cloud Platform. And what Firebase does is it has an API that works for Android, iOS, and the web, especially Angular, so that you can have all those three platforms use the same backend database. So kind of really, really cool. Before we come back from the break, what I want you to do, and this is kind of a requirement for us too, is sign up for something called MLab. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, go to mlab.com, and it really should look like, sorry, I'm already signed in there. So it's kind of course, looking like you would sign in for the first time. Would look like this, mlab.com. And you can see that it says that it's owned by Mongo, right? So MongoDB actually bought MLab. At one point in time, MLab was a separate service, and it was called Mongo Lab. That's the history. So Mongo Lab is software as a service, and it's an online database. We will be using this today. So please sign up for MLab, and we're going to try and connect it to if we have a chance to today, to our Heroku website. So one of the challenges we're going to have and we're going to see is the stuff we've talked about today. MongoDB is local to your computer, right? So imagine if I want to make a site that's online and I have your local computer hosting the site. It's not going to work. We need to be able to connect with something that is hosted online, which is a service like MLab, okay? So that's why we need access to MLab as well. So please do that. So when we come back from break, then everyone has an MLab account, and we can proceed with that later on. So I'm going to stop recording right now. I'm going to take about 15 or 20 minutes, and we're going to come back and continue.